Well, nobody is travelling very far in a hurry, are they? But lots of people are doing up their houses or moving into bigger ones, those with a job, of course. So, are we moving into a cocooning economy? And could that place greater emphasis on the home, meaning we're prepared to spend more of our income, if we have one, propping up the housing market? Is that an unfortunate consequence of COVID-19 or not? We'll look at that today on the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. So, Steve, how about this as a theory? If economies bounce back at some point, for example, we find a vaccine, will the money supply that's be increased as a result of all this government stimulus? Will that cause inflation, and could that cause panic buying of houses? Because we're going to have low interest rate and people thinking, oh my God, we've got inflation, house prices are going to go up. We've got to do it now. Normally, of course, central banks would react to that by lifting interest rates, so they try and keep inflation. But of course, we're going to have very high unemployment, so high that they really can't do that. So is there a chance that we're going to see runaway house prices as a consequence of COVID-19 and other assets, and central banks not being able to do a jot to stop it? Is there a danger that could happen?
Well, I mean, looking at what's happening in Australia and Canada right now, my automatic reaction would be to say, no, the credit dynamics are going to be disastrous. We won't see that. But at the same time, at the moment, we're seeing all the attempts by governments, particularly the Australian and the Canadian governments, to prop up their housing markets. And some people seem to be reacting by going in and at least in the Canadian data, from what I'm seeing, going back and bidding up house prices once more. It seems incomprehensible to me. Because
but there's a whole chunk of people who are doing okay out of this. So there's all the people who, for example, in the UK, and look, my wife is one of them. She's fortunate that she's still working. We're both working. I've always worked from home. She used to travel into London, and we've got lots of friends who used to spend 30 quid a day traveling into London, who've still got a job working from home. That's just the beginning of it. They save 30 quid, then they save on sandwiches and lunch and all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, they find that they've actually got more money than they've ever had. And so they're spending it on doing up their houses or buying new houses because, let's call it half. Half the population is doing okay. The other half is completely devastated. So the half that's got the money could buy houses and push inflation and push house prices and inflation generally could go up.
I don't know about inflation going up, but I mean, we're certainly seeing some weird dynamics in house prices. It's still open slather in Australia. I'm seeing clearance rates in auctions, which the particular Australian pastime of treating the suburban house like it's a Da Vinci, and auction on site and nonsense like that. But the clearance rates are running down to about 50%, and normally you need about a 70% or 80% clearance rate to actually talk about rising prices. And at the same time, I'm getting bombarded now with emails about all these great buying opportunities in Brisbane, which is one of the last places I'd want to live given its temperature situation. So it is a total crapshoot. I'm not going to argue that I've got any crystal ball to talk through it. But and a large part of what I do as well is, I work at the aggregate level. I'm really looking at the aggregate level of private debt, aggregate direction of house prices and so on. What you're talking about is actually partly distributional in that there are some people at the upper end of the income strata who don't have a large amount of debt and whose spending on commodities has been reduced by the whole COVID experience. And the 30 quid a day is not to be sneezed at in terms of saving yourself that on ridiculously high rail fares. And so where's the money going to go? It's not going to go into Marks and Spencer and buying commodities. It's going to go into property, as you say. So you could well have a high-end house price boom while the low-end completely funks.
And with a low, driven in part as well by a low interest rate, which is going to be there for some time. So if we look in the United States, it's not just obviously a UK phenomenon or a US phenomenon. The NAHB house price index in the United States this week has gone from 67 last August down to 30 in April and up to 78 for August 2020. Current sales have gone from 73 to 84. People with the intention to buy in the next 6 months has gone from 71 last year to 78 now. And people are looking as well. So traffic levels of prospective buyers has gone from 50 to 65. So by whatever measure, the housing market in the United States as well is roaring ahead, and in the UK, house prices are rising. Whereas normally in the summer months they'd be subdued, but it's out of London selling. The right move data that's been out this week, Scotland and the Midlands. Asking prices are 6.3% up year on year right now. Wales is up 5.8%. London's about 2%, but still up. But people are getting out of the big cities and out into the countryside, so they're moving as well. So there's quite a few dynamics going on here, but I wonder how long it's going to go on for.
Yeah, well, I mean, the trouble with this crisis is a bit like with the last one as well. I think we were discussing this ourselves way back in the late noughties in Sydney. You'll have a government bring in a support of some description for whatever it is, a support for the market, support for incomes, etc., and take it away as it starts to have an effect, and before it's taking it away too early. So and we've seen that with the various schemes this time around, particularly in the UK and America. Having a scheme which means people have got a cash flow, and in the American case, I think it was $600 a week was given as an income support for about 4 weeks. And there was actually a dramatic increase in consumption because that was more than the people were earning. The minimum wage jobs, they were all below minimum wage jobs in many cases.
You had to be unemployed to get it, though. So they wouldn't be people buying houses necessarily, and they did.
No, but it does give you a spike for the house for the consumer prices, which you wouldn't have factored in otherwise. Yeah. So do you think? And then in the UK, lots of places mortgage holidays as well, or encouraging banks to give mortgage holidays, and then in the UK, which has almost certainly contributed here, Rishi Sunak has given a stamp duty holiday up to next March. So no stamp duty if you're buying a house up to $500,000, which would be which would be quite easy to do in Scotland and Wales. So that might explain part of that growth as well. So the question is why? Why do you need to prop up house price? Isn't that the least of the issues that we face right now? Isn't unemployment a slightly bigger issue, and getting people back into jobs? Oh, of course it is, but in many ways that's been ignored and pushed into the background. Certainly, like in Australia and Canada, the two outstanding examples of house price bubble-driven economies. That's been driven right back into the background because since the financial crisis, you have had the slow grind upwards of the economy, meaning unemployment was historically low before COVID hit, and in some ways they've even lost the focus on what unemployment actually is. They never really had it, the belief that it's voluntary and that it's a sensible thing to require somebody who's unemployed, as they do in Australia, to apply for about 40 jobs a month, when the ratio of available jobs to unemployed people is about 1 to 10. I actually feel not just sorry for the unemployed who've got to do that, but the bloody employers who get a whole bunch of applications that are useless. It's making it hard for them to find the people they're actually looking for. But the focus has gone right onto the property market and making sure that doesn't fall. And I think that largely reflects the political class that elects whether they're Tory or Labor, whether they're a Liberal or Labor in the Australian case, or Democrat or Republican. The immediate political interests are, first of all, the financial sector, and secondly, house owners. And that's what they're pandering to.
Well, that is not a particularly healthy outcome, is it? Look, we'll look more at the consequences of this COVID cocooning, staying at home, spending local, spending more time at home, not spending any money on travel. Are we skewing the economy in a way it's going to cause irreparable damage, or is it a good thing? Listen to the full version of this podcast. To do that, you need to become a supporter of Steve Keen on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen, or become a subscriber at Debunking Economics. I'm Phil Dobbie, back with Steve Keen again next week. Thanks for listening.